Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneur's Wealth Channel, the information channel dedicated to entrepreneurs, successful and aspiring people. Remember that immersing yourself in the right training and practicing the right action is the key to your success. In this video we talk about the dopamine neurotransmitter, how it works and how we can use it to our advantage to achieve our goals, avoiding loss of motivation. Let's begin. All motivation and drive comes from a neurotransmitter in the brain called dopamine. It pushes you to follow the things you need or want. If it weren't for the dopamine, you wouldn't even be able to move a muscle. Basically, you need it to keep going and survive, like all of the hormones that make up our system. Just like some kinds of toys need a battery similarly. You need dopamine to function. So to simplify, we can say that dopamine is your battery. Dopamine works in a rather interesting way. It has a bottom line and a peak. Let's say for example your bottom line is 2 and the peak is 4. Let's say you eat a particularly tasty food or smoke a cigarette. Dopamine in this case suddenly increases to peak 4. After a while, the dopamine level should go down. And here is the most interesting part. After the peak, the dopamine level does not return to its previous lowest level of 2, but falls below level 2. The higher the dopamine peak, the bigger the subsequent crash will be. In other words, the higher the peak, the lower the dopamine level becomes. Afterward, you probably experienced it yourself. For example, after achieving a big goal like graduation, dream job, you felt great for a while, but after a short while, you started feeling empty, sad, and even depressed. This is a simple example of how dopamine drops below its baseline after a big spike. Understanding the relationship between the bottom and the peak is very important. That's why I'll give you another example. So be careful. Let's say you discover a new video game activity for the first time and you have a huge dopamine spike. As we said earlier, the higher the peak, the bigger the crash, so the lower the new bottom line after the dopamine crash. You feel sad, so to reach the same level of excitement, you go back and play again. You get another dopamine spike, but not as high as before. If you keep playing the game over and over, you will get lower and lower dopamine spikes, and at the same time your bottom line will drop lower and lower. This is why you sometimes see people playing video games a lot or doing any other addictive activity and then they reach a point where they have no energy. No motivation to do anything. They often become depressed and anxious. Again, the explanation is simple: by increasing their dopamine level. Quite often they have reduced their bottom line a lot and now don't have enough dopamine stores to do anything else. In other words, you become resistant to the hormone dopamine. As I explained at the beginning, dopamine is like a dead battery. The more often you take it to the peak, the sooner it runs out. It's not just about video games, but a lot of things you enjoy doing lead to dopamine spikes, whether it's food, social media, cigarettes, chocolate, exercise, etc., regardless of the activity. If you keep doing this very often, you will eventually reduce your bottom line, which will lead to a low level of motivation and impetus for other things. In life you don't have different dopamine batteries for different activities. You only have one universal battery for all the activities you're going to do. So if you want to have a healthy amount of dopamine stores, you must intentionally reduce the number of things that increase your dopamine. Soon we will see the tools to do it. But first let me tell you why dopamine works the way it does. There is an evolutionary reason behind it, and understanding it is important. Imagine living in the past 10,000 years ago. You wake up and have no food or water left. So you have to go look for it. But outside there are predatory dangers, poisonous animals, cold and storms. However, you have to feel motivated to do it because your family is hungry. Dopamine and how the brain motivates you to tackle these challenges. So you go and find lots of fruits and berries and pick them. Now you have some food for your family. You have found the reward, a dopamine release occurs which makes you feel happy. But after that big dopamine release, it has to go back to a lower level. Why? Because if it stayed there at those high levels, you'd never feel motivated to go out and forage for food again. Then it goes down again. It actually drops to a lower level than it did before, because after that big dopamine rush there isn't much left, as we've already mentioned. Okay. Now that we understand how dopamine works, let's talk about the solutions and things we can do to replenish it, in order to have more motivation and stimulation. Let's use the example of exercise. Exercise always causes some level of dopamine release. Of course it varies from person to person, so let's assume you're somewhere in between. You don't hate exercising, but you don't like it either. You hate sweating, but you want to because you want to improve your health and you think you need to lose weight. You've already tried several times, but you always end up losing interest and giving up. Now you have just joined the gym and started a new workout routine to make this experience more enjoyable, and you carry your cell phone with you and listen to music while exercising. You even got a friend to work out with you so you can talk to them and feel more motivated before you go, and drink some energy drinks so you don't feel sluggish. Also, you focus on the reward. The reward will be that you look great and feel great. So you think, I hate being here right now, but I'm going to love it when I'm done. If I exercise every day this week, I'll treat myself to a nice pizza restaurant dinner on Saturday. So here's the scenario. Do something you don't really like and do it every day to make it bearable. You added pleasant things, energy drinks, music and friends. You are also focused on the end goal in an attempt to motivate yourself. It sounds like a good plan, but doing so has many problems. First off, you're using multiple layers of motivation to make exercise more enjoyable. This way you condition dopamine levels to be high only when you have all these motivations. This means that exercise will only be enjoyable if you have energy drinks, music and friends. Take one off and you will feel like giving up. So if your friend skips a workout, you'll be much less enthusiastic about working out. And that will be a roadblock between you and your goals to make up for it. Avoid the temptation to always make things as pleasant as possible. What you should look for is an intermittent release of dopamine. Some days you will have it and some days you won't. You can still exercise every day just fine, as long as you make sure you don't get super high levels of dopamine every day. So you should look for some variety. Sometimes you listen to music while exercising, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you go to exercise in the morning, which is your favorite time of day, but sometimes you go in the afternoon, when you hate exercising. Sometimes you drink your energy drink, other times you don't. It seems contradictory. But the truth is, if you want to maintain motivation for your projects, for exercise, work, relationships, etc., the key thing is to make sure your dopamine doesn't peak too often. Now, going back a bit. There's another big problem with those workout habits that I mentioned earlier. You focus on the reward, losing weight and being healthy and having pizza on the weekend. I'll explain why this is a problem. At Stanford, many years ago, an experiment was done with kindergarteners who like to draw. Researchers have begun giving those children a reward for drawing a gold star or something a young child would find rewarding. Then the researchers stopped giving the kids the gold star. And what they found is that those kids now had a much lower tendency to draw on their own. This was because there was no reward. You see, before getting the rewards, the kids liked to draw. They had a kind of natural desire to do that. But after they received the reward, everything centered around this one. If we give ourselves rewards for something, we tend to associate less pleasure with the activity itself that evoked that reward. Your brain understands that you didn't do the activity because you enjoyed it, but you did it for the reward. Then the neural circuits for dopamine that would have been active during the activities dissociate and occur only with the reward. How can you fix it? You have to start telling yourself that making this effort is a good thing. Tell yourself that the effort part is the best part. Which is painful. Yes, I know very well that it is not a good feeling, but it is my choice and I focus on this. If you repeat this over and over, you'll start to associate dopamine release with exertion. Luckily, dopamine is easily affected by your thoughts. So to sum up, don't peak dopamine before you engage in an effort or even after you engage in it. The secret is to increase it with the effort itself. So if the effort is exercise, forget about weight loss or health. Also, don't add motivation levels before exercise, rather make the exertion of exercise the enjoyable part. A good example is intermittent fasting. Some people have a 12-hour feeding window every 24 hours, others go on long 2 or 3 day fasts. This is how fasting works. If you are very hungry, dopamine is increased and that is why food tastes even better. So that's the big reward that comes at the end. But what happens to people who get used to intermittent fasting is that they start to enjoy the fast itself, not the big dopamine release of eating after the fasting period. Their state of mind is clearer. They love the feeling of feeling lighter and think about all the good things that are happening in their body. they have been fasting for 16 hours and enjoy part of this time. So it's not about the reward one gets when the fast ends, the fast itself, i.e. the effort, becomes pleasurable. Dopamine release joins the effort. What happens is that the effort becomes the reward. It gets easier and more rewarding with time. So to sum up everything we talked about in this video, dopamine is like a battery and every pleasurable activity depletes it. Unfortunately, you only have one battery, so you need to use it wisely and start intentionally removing peak driving activities from your life so that your dopamine pool starts to replenish or it doesn't peak too low. Dopamine has a bottom line and the highest peak. Biggest peak, crash later. If you keep bringing it to its peak very often with video games, social media or anything else addictive, the bottom line will get lower and lower and you will reach a point where even getting up out of bed will be a huge challenge for you. Indulge yourself on the effort itself. Do not peak dopamine before you engage in an effort or even after you engage in it. Learn to increase it with the effort itself. If the video was helpful, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You will not miss the next training videos to achieve your financial success and personal growth. Thanks for watching.